Well, it's the morning after the presidential election, and I'm sure a lot of us are exhausted this morning after staying up and watching all the final speeches and watching all the numbers come in. But we do have a pretty decisive decision on the presidential election. Joining us are two men who have been doing loads and loads of interviews over the last 2 years, talking about the congressional races, the presidential election, negative ads and all the things that come in with running for president and running for office. We have Bruce Oppenheimer and John Geer. Thank you for joining us, first of all. So what do you think? What are your reactions to Barack Obama as president of the United States?
Well, I'll let you go ahead and start off there, Bruce.
Well, I think I think for a number of weeks, a lot of us who are professional political scientists, looking at all the data that has come in, are not surprised by the outcome. I mean, when you average all the polls, some were higher, some were lower, but at about 6% is what we expected. And so I think we had a chance to get ready for this to happen, but it's very hard to believe that someone who, 4.5 years ago was a state senator is now president-elect of the United States. And that it was not like he didn't have any competition along the way. So first, mounting a campaign that was capable of winning the Democratic nomination from, Senator Hillary Clinton, who a lot of people thought had it locked up,
Absolutely.
A year ago, and winning that nomination, and then going into a general election where the circumstances were such that it was very favorable to a Democratic candidate, but with the uncertainty of how an African-American candidate with an unusual name and an unusual background would do, and to see him win and to see the level of enthusiasm in acts beyond voting. So part of it is focusing on the vote, right? And the vote is relatively close compared to certain other participation acts, for example, number of people contributing to a campaign, things along that line. So that level of enthusiasm in terms of contributing to a campaign, in terms of going to rallies, I think that's what really has stunned the country more than just that he finally won, to see that he could come from where he was to be president-elect.
What's your take?
Well, I've tried to think a little bit about it. It wasn't the massive victory that some people thought that Obama might have. Some polls were, as high as 10 and 12-point victory, which he didn't secure, and I suspect that's more polling error than anything else. But this isn't really a partisan statement, but I think you've got to view it as kind of a good day for the United States of America. The fact that the conditions were favorable to a Democrat, and in fact a Democrat won despite potential fears of racism. It's a good day because the amount of interest in this campaign across the world was staggering, and they were almost unified in their support of Barack Obama. And the fact that he won really dawns a new age, potentially. There's lots of hard work ahead, and there's lots of problems facing the country, but the fact that he won and did so in pretty convincing fashion. I mean, it's probably not a classic landslide, but clearly a decisive win. It's really going to be interesting to watch, and the idea, if you watched the coverage last night and you saw John Lewis, for example, or Jesse Jackson crying, I mean, these are men that obviously have literally battle scars, and the fact that 40 years or 50, depending on when you want to start off, later from the civil rights movement, we have an African-American president. It's really quite amazing, and when his family occupies the White House, I mean, it's just going to send all kinds of signals across the world in ways that we can't imagine. So I think it's really interesting, and the fact that somebody comes from basically nowhere and wins. I mean, obviously an individual talent, and I think the political system, despite all its warts, works in the sense that this guy went through a 2-year vetting process. Mm-hmm. He defeated a very tough senator from New York, Hillary Clinton, and went on to defeat a very tough candidate in the general election, and everything has been thrown at him, and he still stands and has been cool the whole time. I think the process roughly works. I mean, there's a lot of partisan, bad feelings, of course, and that's inevitable. But, when somebody wins this contest, you should feel pretty confident that this is the right person. And certainly history over time has borne that out. I mean, we've selected pretty good people to govern at the time, and this is now Obama's time.
Now, Obama keeps talking about hope, and you kept hearing that word hope through the whole campaign, which is something we all want, especially in these tough economic times. But how does Obama turn that into something tangible?
Well, that's the tough question, which he's now beginning to roll out. He's going to start over the next couple of days rolling out his team. And the real question I have is he going to send a signal that he's going to govern from the middle of the spectrum or more from the left? He's going to be under pressure from the left wing of the Democratic Party to tilt that way. He has an opportunity. I mean, and this is always the case. In 1980, Ronald Reagan had an opportunity and he cashed in on it. 1932. Franklin Roosevelt had an opportunity, he cashed in on it. And it's possible that Barack Obama won't. And maybe 2010 will be like 1994 with strong repudiation of the Democratic Party. But he has a shot. And, we will see. The country will give him the classic honeymoon. Mm-hmm. And we'll see what he can make of it. I mean, so far, over the 2 years, he's run a pretty good campaign, and so there's no reason to think he won't be up to this task too.
Now, how do you think that he won some of those big, states that were teetering in the middle? And then last night, I guess I was really surprised to see, Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Florida, they just kept coming, and Obama kept winning. How do you think he managed to do that?
Well, I think it was largely a national trend, and those were states which were sort of in the middle 4 years ago. And so some of them he moved more than others. But, if you asked what states were in play 4 years ago, those were the states. You move the vote about 5 or 6 points, which is what happened nationally. Mm-hmm. And you start moving those states in the middle from being states which John Kerry lost to being states which Obama wins. Now, there are other specific effects. Clearly, Florida is much more hard hit by sort of the foreclosure crisis. Right. States like Ohio are much more hard hit by the economic downturn, and especially in the automobile industry. And then there's some friends and neighbors things. Clearly and I don't think Indiana's been called yet, but doing well in Indiana. He's from a neighboring state. Mm-hmm. And again, there are some economic spillover into Indiana. Again, a state which has been dependent substantially on the automobile industry for a long period of time and the disappearance of that industry. So if you see that and you understand that in some states, he moved bigger margins than the national trend, and in other states, at about that rate. And Virginia is a state that's changing. The population of Virginia is changing. You could see that in the Senate election 2 years ago. So you can see some movements. People started talking about Virginia no longer as a red state, but as a purple state. And right. So you move that. So essentially what you see, with some exceptions in the country, is that most of the states moved in the direction that the national election was moving over the 4-year period. And it wasn't just, I hate to tell you, but not only did Barack Obama, do better than he did last time in Ohio, he did better than he did last time in Utah. Mm-hmm. He did a little better than he did last time, than Kerry did in Alaska 4 years ago, even though Palin was on the ticket. So you see that there are some states, the 4 I've counted, where he actually doesn't do better. But if my count is right, in 46 of the states in the District of Columbia, Obama's totals improve, which is about what you'd expect in an election that moves in that way nationally.
Now, you keep hearing, too, that this is the longest and the most expensive campaign that we have ever had. Do you think that the way this campaign was run is going to change the landscape for campaigns in the future?
Well, I'm not sure it's the longest. Our own Andrew Jackson announced his candidacy for the presidency the day after he lost 1824. So I'm a little bothered.
Presidency, and he was there.
Yeah, I was there. That's right. I was there and defending negativity.
Definitely the most expensive, though.
Definitely the most expensive. Though some of the earlier campaigns, when you control for inflation, other stuff like that, you might be surprised. Mm-hmm. But I do think what's changed, at least in regards to campaign finance, is that all the system's been blown up. Right. Barack Obama blew it up. It really started with Howard Dean and George Bush and the kinds of money they raised. But Barack Obama has now blown through general election public funding. And so the next candidate, and presumably Obama will run for renomination in 12, but the Republican who's going to be able to succeed is that person who's going to be able to compete with Obama on fundraising, and that's going to be a formidable task. So I think that's something that's going to be really interesting to see. And of course, the Democrats, who now control, have little incentive to reform the system because they've tapped into it much more successfully than the Republicans. And so I don't think we're going to see any movement on campaign finance reform. But I do think we're in a new era where we're back to the amount of money people raise. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because remember, a huge amount of Obama's money was based on internet contributions and small contributions. So in some ways, it democratized the process.
So you brought up 2012. Do you think that, we keep hearing Sarah Palin is so popular. Do you think that Sarah Palin has a chance of being the candidate in 2012, or is it too soon to even think about that?
I have to say that when I watched McCain give his concession speech last night and she was beside him, I thought she might just jump in and announce right then. She seemed to be on her mind. It's obviously too early to tell, but I can imagine that, Sarah Palin's certainly going to give it serious consideration. I think Mitt Romney will give it serious consideration. And there's lots of other candidates. But right now, people start speculating about it. Of course, on the Democratic side, there won't be any speculation, or at least not very much. But, we'll see. But I think right now the focus needs to be on the kind of team that Obama puts into place and the kind of plans he has for governing, because he talked a lot about hope and he did have some specific plans, but, he's now the rubber's got to hit the road right now.
It'll be interesting to see which one of those policies actually come to fruition.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, John Gear and Bruce Oppenheimer. And stick with VUCast for more stories on President Barack Obama. Thank you.